The Vikings have 12 days left to get under the salary cap, and that means they're probably going to have to do something with Kirk Cousins. Or will they? Let's talk about all of the options in excruciating detail on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Why, hello there. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. This show is available on all platforms, including YouTube and Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. So I haven't done this episode yet this offseason, but I've talked about just about everything on Kirk Cousins. But here's the deal. Cousins is going to cost like $36 million and change in 2023 if the Vikings take no action. That is not as ridiculous a number as it used to be just because of how the cap has grown. But if they want to do something, they could restructure him. They could do a short extension. They could do a long extension. Those are kind of the three main options. So we'll talk about, or they could do nothing. So I guess four main options. So we'll go over those four options in detail and what they mean. This is not going to be an evaluation of Kirk Cousins. For the most part, I think most people have pretty much planted their flag. If you like him, you want to keep him. There's a couple things here for you. If you don't like him, here's what the exit strategy is. And this is going to be a little repetitive for people who have been listening every day, like all of February. I love you, and I'm sorry that some of this is going to be a repeat, but think of it as a review session as we draw closer and closer to the day where something actually happens. I think we are kind of in any day now territory with Cousins. It might happen tomorrow or the next day or whatever. So I wanted to make sure I had this kind of cram sesh out for people who wanted to see what the options are. So first one, let's start with the easiest stuff, which is what if the Vikings do nothing with Kirk Cousins? He has 2 void years on the end of his contract. If you are unfamiliar with what void years are, you can think of them as like fake contract years. The best way I know to explain it is like, what if the Vikings signed Kirk Cousins to 2 more years on his deal? So, 2023 is the last year on his deal. What if 24 and 25 were 2 years where he got whatever base salary, none of it guaranteed, and then they cut him in 2024 before any of that, before the start of the league year as a cap casualty? That is basically how void years behave, where signing bonus will prorate over the life of the contract, and kind of become this evened out little mini cap hit one each year. And then when you cut the player, that all accelerates and hits you at once. And Kirk Cousins has 2 void years on the end of his contract. So he has $6.25 million, $6.25 million in each of the next 3 years in signing bonus. And he's got $30 million in fully guaranteed salary going into 2023. So there's that money's getting paid to Kirk Cousins. And with the no trade, the Vikings are paying it. I've talked about that at length. Trading Kirk Cousins is not a feasible option. I know the no trade is not like he could waive it, but he would have to want to, and it's pretty clear that he doesn't. And it's pretty clear that the Vikings aren't going that route either. We've also heard that the way Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has talked about this, it's very clear that he is not going to get rid of Kirk Cousins without a clear succession plan in place. He doesn't want to be in the place where the Texans are, or where the Colts are, or where the Panthers are, where they just don't know who their QB is, or what the Raiders had to do with Derek Carr. Now they just have a need at quarterback. Kwesi doesn't want to be there, and neither do the Wilfs, and I think they see eye to eye on that, and that's going to be where the Vikings are. And I don't think you should want to be there either. The being in the market for a quarterback is like the worst thing for a franchise ever. So Cousins can stay in the building until you get the succession plan. But Darren Wolfson has said that he said on his Scoops podcast, I think it's part of Score North, that he would be shocked if the Vikings didn't at some point bring in a young quarterback to be the sort of heir apparent either this year or next year. And maybe like they really like Caleb Williams or something, and they're going to try to make an aggressive move for him or whatever name you think they can get. It's a little bit too early to start making 2024 draft calls anyways. So all that said, Kirk Cousins is your quarterback in 2023. That is basically a lock. You can pretty much set your watch by that. So the question becomes, do you get Kirk Cousins' cap hit down? And the answer to that is if you need to, right? So let's say they don't need to take that $36 million down. Let's say they cut a bunch of players, they make the cap space elsewise, they restructure guys or they do other stuff, right? It's not with Kirk Cousins. That would be I think the most ideal scenario for we're setting ourselves up for 2024 and setting up a succession plan. Let's say they really want to trade up for someone. There was a report that came out that said Kevin O'Connell really liked Will Levis, which makes sense. He's got a lot of relationships in Kentucky. That shouldn't be surprising. So let's say they want to trade up for Will Levis. I personally would disagree, but don't worry about the name. Substitute Anthony Richardson if you must. And let's say they pick one of these quarterbacks in the first round. He sits for a year. Cousins walks. Now you have 2024. And if you don't do anything to Cousins' contract, you have second-year quarterback starting in 2024, and you've kind of borrowed minimal cap from 2024 to deal with the exit strategy of Kirk Cousins. It's sort of the maximum 2024 strategy. However, if you do need to make a little bit of cap space, but you don't want to commit further to Kirk Cousins, you don't want to sign him for 2024 because you're bringing in your young quarterback, and you want him to be, you want there to be an opportunity for him to start in 24. You can restructure Cousins' deal still because he's got those 2 void years. The cap sees this as a 3-year contract and restructures work as though it is a 3-year contract, which means you can essentially, for every $2 that you want to move from this year into next year, because of the way the void accelerates, for every $2 you want to move from this year to next year, you restructure $3 of Kirk Cousins' deal. So you want to slash 10 mil off the cap and borrow, essentially schluck it into next year, borrow 10 mil from next year's cap if you prefer. Restructure $15 million of Kirk Cousins' contract. It's not a negotiation thing. It's a button you can just press. It's baked into the language of the contract that the Vikings can kind of do that willy-nilly. And you can sort of straddle that line. And you don't have to, you could do all 30 million of his guaranteed roster bonus and base salary and take 20 million off of the cap, move that 20 million into 10 mil next year and 10 mil the year after that. And then when Cousins' year voids, those two squish back together and become 20 mil in 2024. And you can say, all right, we're just going to take a horrible dead cap hit. It would be a total of $32 million in dead cap. But hey, we took 20 mil off of this year and we did a whole all-in thing. That's probably a bad idea. There's probably a middle ground that's really smart. But you can also do this whenever you want. You don't have to do this to get under the cap. Of course, if you're cutting a player to get under the cap and then making more cap space with Kirk Cousins' deal anyways, you probably should have switched those two things around. But essentially, you can think of that as a tool where functionally the Vikings can siphon as much of that 36 million or as much of that up to 20 million of that $36 million cap hit. They can siphon as much of it out as they want and put that burden into 2024 and deal with it next year. As much or as little as they want. So if you are one of those people that's really worried about irresponsibly kicking the can down the road, fret not. They can do this with just like a couple mil to just like shave it, and it won't be like a huge deal, and then they'll really make their other decisions another way. So there's your exit strategy plan. The exit strategy of Kirk Cousins is he starts in 2023 and he walks. That's the way to get rid of Kirk Cousins. You're not trading him this year. You're not cutting him or anything like that. So if you want Kirk Cousins out the building, he plays this year and that's it. And then he walks. And it seems like that is as likely as anything to be the actual outcome. Then there's actual extensions and renegotiating things, getting Kirk Cousins to actually agree to stuff. Because everything so far, Kirk Cousins doesn't have to like it at all. It can be his least favorite deal, and there's nothing he can do to prevent the Vikings from doing a restructure, or he can't force them to sign them to a new contract or anything. He doesn't have that much leverage. So what about the stuff Kirk Cousins would agree to? That is going to be next. But first, let me talk to you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the planet. covered in 100% chocolate. They come in absolutely insane flavors. I mean, truly criminal stuff, real sicko stuff. Sickos over at Built Bar with their churro protein bars, their peanut butter brownie, their coconut almond. Who do they think they are? They think they can get away with that. 130 calories on one of those, 17 grams of protein. Disgusting. Uh, if you like the idea of only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein, and something that tastes like you're eating a churro, if that's relevant to your interests, you can go to your nearest sicko place, aka Walmart or Sam's Club, and grab a box right off the shelf. You don't even have to wait for delivery anymore, although you can still, of course, go get it delivered right to your door by going to built.com. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen or watch, I guess, check out patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. You can go watch a video on Christian Gonzalez for free. And if you like it, subscribe. You can go watch one on Keely Ringo. And this weekend, one on Quentin Johnson is going to come out, I think, the day the wide receivers test. So, or Quentin Johnston. I keep saying Johnson. Johnston with a T. So go check all that stuff out. I'll have draft breakdowns coming down, hopefully pretty regularly, until the draft itself happens over there on Patreon. You can also find the salary cap video, where if you are confused about signing bonus and void years and NLTBE incentives and all of that, come count some beans with me. I'll explain it all to you. That is free to watch, by the way, the salary cap video. The next option with Kirk Cousins is one that kind of doesn't feel like one. However, maybe not. Is that a good tease? So a 1-year extension for a while was kind of the most logical thing to me. It felt like, all right, he played pretty well in 20. I was pretty happy with how he played in 2022. He earned another year. Let's give him another year. Let's kind of keep it on this. For Kirk Cousins, he'll want to come to the negotiating table often because it allows him to get more signing bonuses. It allows him to better play the ever-changing cap environment. And ultimately, the more he is renegotiating his deal, the more money he makes. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, Cousins, he doesn't want to have to negotiate. He doesn't want to have to, like, come prove himself every year. I highly doubt that I'm actually like 99% certain that that's not the case. That if Kirk Cousins had his way, he would be renegotiating his contract every single year. He would sign 1-year deals forever. But he would want to do it a year ahead of time, so he has that security. That security blanket is very important. He never wants to play in a contract year, but I think he would always want to just be like, all right, I'm in my contract year. Let's tack the next year on and live in this space, because I think there's genuinely tens of millions of dollars that he gets that he wouldn't get if he signed like a 5-year deal. But, however, Tom Pelissero came last week, went on, I think it was just NFL Network, and said that he didn't think that the 1-year deal was really on the table. That, hey, it's got to be a long-term extension, commit to him, or let him walk. Which I found like to be kind of surprising news, because the 1-year thing is a decent compromise. And the way that Kwesi has talked about this has been through the lens of compromise, has been kind of, hey, we have our needs. We want to have our flexibility. We need, we need to keep our options open. We need to be able to get your cap hit down if that's what it takes. But we also understand that you have your needs and all that. And what's our middle ground? And it felt like a 1-2 year extension every time has been the has been the way for everybody to kind of get what they want. So I was really surprised to hear that. Well, Pelissero goes on Paul Allen at the Combine and says, yeah, I don't know why people took that out of context. And he like walks it way back and essentially says that his original quote was kind of taken out of context by a lot of people on social media. And that really he was offering his own opinion on the matter, saying, I, Tom Pelissero, do not think a short-term deal makes sense, which fair enough, valid opinion. But that's not a report. That's not this is not going to happen. It's I, person on TV right now, just don't think it's a good idea. That's very different. And we have to be very careful, especially this time of year where rumors go crazy. Head on a swivel time of year, right? Do not fall for your Adar and Schefters, but also don't fall for the classic blunder of mistaking an opinion for a report. We do this with Paul Allen all the time, and it's wrong all the time. Paul Allen will go on his radio show and he'll say whatever, right? He'll say what his opinions are. It's an opinion talk radio. He'll say what he thinks. And yeah, he's employed by the Vikings. He's plugged into the organization. He has relationships with all of the people. So that probably informs it some. But if he's reporting something, he'll say it. He'll say, this is what is happening. This is, but if it's like an opinion, if it's, I think they should extend Kirk Cousins and that's Paul Allen's opinion, that's just Paul Allen's opinion. That's not news. That's just his opinion. And if you like it, you like it. Don't mix up opinion for a report. And I think reporters should be able to give their opinions without it being misconstrued for a report. I don't think they need to be these like robotic, like news Pez dispensers. It's okay if Tom Pelissero wants to say, I don't know if a short-term extension for Kirk Cousins makes sense, even if it's an opinion you disagree with or whatever. So all that said, I don't know if that's okay. Pelissero gave an opinion and people went crazy with it. And then he went on Paul Allen and tried to clarify, or Pelissero said what was going to happen, but the Vikings went up to him and said, hey, dude, why'd you let that cat out of the bag? Can you walk that back next time you're on the mic? And he's like, all right, yeah, sure. And then he walks it back on Paul Allen. I could totally see that being the case. That kind of thing happens a lot where a reporter will say something or something will leak. Something will get genuinely reported, not via the Schefters and the rap sheets that are basically mouthpieces for agents and teams, but will get reported through like more authentic channels. And then the Shefties and the rap sheets will come out and like give a conflicting report. And the second one is always the false one because that's the damage control one, right? So maybe there's something like this happening. All of that speculation is to say, I don't think this is off the table yet, the 1-year extension thing. It still seems way less likely than I thought it was maybe 2 weeks ago, just because if Tom Pelissero had that opinion, like, again, like he is a plugged in guy and maybe there's something informing that. So bring the odds down a little bit, tack another plus 100, 200 onto the odds. But I don't think it's totally off the table. And that means we get to kind of explain what it is. And this is the one that I've been talking about a lot for all of this. So I'll do it quickly, but basically, I would give him like a 1-year extension. So he's now the quarterback in 2024. We can fully guarantee it for you. With a base salary of, I want to say 30 mil. And then he will make $30 million base salary 2 years in a row. Or I think just to make it escalate, 32 mil, right? Just like almost a symbolic 2 million. He will have a cap hit of 38 million. And if you look at the cap hits of quarterbacks around the league, that'll rank like 9th or 10th. So if you think Kirk Cousins is the 9th or 10th best QB in the league, making about 9th or 10th money, that feels about fair to me. And also, it's more base salary than Kirk Cousins has ever made in his career. The only time Kirk Cousins has ever made, assuming this year, no restructure this year, because this is a $30 million like salary year. But before this year, Cousins has never made 30 mil in just base salary. He has brought home 40 mil sometimes when he has done restructures, but that's because signing bonuses front load a lot of the cash. You get a lot of cash up front when you do that. And so you get these crazy, Cousins made $55 million this year because he got all of his money up front. But he's never just made like 32 mil base salary. So I think Cousins says yes to that. That's a pretty good salary element for Cousins. And I'm not putting any of it in signing bonus, which leaves that open to becoming signing bonus later because I'm not adding prorated stuff. I'm not doing anything more to the second void year in 2025. That remains a void year with $6.25 million in it. That I can then do the same thing in 24 to get that cap hit down if I want to and restructure and move money into it. To me, the biggest downside of that is that if you don't like Kirk Cousins, you have to watch him for another year. And if you do like Kirk Cousins, then that's not a downside to you, which is why I always thought that was the cleanest solution to the Kirk Cousins thing. I think that's the clean way to extend him. And then for me, if you're not going to do that, then just don't touch the contract or do a small restructure to it if you need to shave a little off the top just to get under the cap for March. All of those options, though, are fairly conservative. Either letting him walk, or you're kind of just tweaking the cap, or just maybe tack 1 year. What about a 5-year extension? This is what a lot of people have been begging. I know Ron Johnson's just been begging for this. And why do we, let's commit to this guy. All right. He's been the quarterback for 5 years. He's our guy. All right. Let's just make him the guy and he can just play out the rest of his career as a Viking. What does that look like? That's going to be next. So moving on, what would a 5-year Kirk Cousins extension look like? If you are an ardent Kirk stan, this might be what you've been begging for. Get me out of this world where we don't know if he's going to be the guy or not, or blah, blah, blah. Let's just commit to this dude. He's been our dude, right? So for this, I am going to start with Nick's. Nick Olson. Love you, buddy. He did like a Twitter thread that was a whole bunch of contract extensions and stuff. That was like his whole offseason plan, what he would do. And as part of it, it was a 5-year Kirk Cousins extension. He clarified that he would rather like trade him or whatever. And he got totally cooked for this, which is really funny. But I'm going to start with your structure. And I'll be honest, there's some edits that I'll make to it here. But I think it's a good starting place, right? So the first thing that he does here is it's a 5-year extension for, I think, a total of $45 million in new money per year, which I think is really easy for Kirk Cousins to say yes to, right? I absolutely don't see Kirk Cousins rejecting the contract that Nick proposed. If anything, I think that's a little bit high. I think you could get away with $40 million per year, or like maybe a minute, like 42.5 per year. And I think you could probably get away with that. Like, that's not the contract that I would come to the table to begin with. I would probably try to get away with, would you take 40 mil a year? And he'll come and say, no, I want, 48. And then you try to get to a middle ground. 50 mil of that is in signing bonus, which means a lot of it prorates out. Although that means taking the entire base salary of 2023 and converting it. So most of that signing bonus comes from 2023 money. And the base salary for Cousins becomes the veteran minimum. Again, that's not something that he would have a problem with. He's taking home 50 mil that year. That's more money than he's ever taken home in his entire career in a single year, or 51 mil to be exact. But it's like cap stuff. So his cap number in 2023 would become $17 million. You save 19 mil doing that. So that's awesome. In 2024, he gets a base salary of 25 mil, and then it kind of escalates from there. 39 mil, and then 45. And the last year is 50 mil with no part of it guaranteed. It's kind of a funny money year. So there's a couple of edits that I'd make to this. Oh, and he guarantees the first 2 years of this. That's the first edit that I would make. I would half guarantee 2025. I don't think you need to fully guarantee all of it. I know Cousins likes the 2 years fully guaranteed thing, and maybe that's Nick just saying, like, I don't think he would say yes to anything less. But I think if you are negotiating a 5-year extension, I think the negotiating platform changes a little bit. And I think that you can kind of get away with a little bit more like, hey, we're going to half guarantee that year. You're probably seeing that money. We're probably restructuring base salary and stuff anyways, so it'll be even harder to cut you. But I just want to have that much more like flexibility. Probably a moot point though, again, because this is a world where you're committing really, really hard to Cousins, right? And cutting him 2 years after signing this deal probably means that things didn't go according to the way that you're planning them right now. Like, that means there was an expectation that wasn't met. The biggest issue, and probably the one that people are screaming at me right now, is that Cousins is going to get old on this contract. He's going to be 35 in the 2023 season, which means this contract is fully guaranteeing Kirk Cousins money through his age 37 season. Aaron Rodgers is 39 and thinking about retiring, right? And like, you can clearly see the effects of age on him. Tom Brady's not the norm. We definitely shouldn't expect quarterbacks to play till they're 45. Matt Ryan played 2022 at 37 years old. He got benched for Sam Ehlinger. The cliff tends to hit in that late 30s, and we've got Cousins under contract throughout all of those late 30s. There is a world where Cousins has a $55 million cap hit in 2025, is 37 years old, and his arm gives out on him. And that is a disastrous world. which not only does that torpedo that season, but because 55, I think, and I don't know what the cap will be in 2025, but I think 55 becomes a bigger percent of the cap. Like if you assume a $256 million cap for 2025, which might be too conservative. I don't know exactly how we expect gambling money to affect the cap. But that would be 21% of the cap if it's 256. If it's like 275 mil, if it basically increases at the same amount, that's still 20% of the cap. That's too much. And so you probably end up restructuring money there and taking big dead cap hits and getting yourself into a situation like where the Packers are with Aaron Rodgers for a guy who will be playing at his age 37 season. So that commitment to me is a little bit much, which is part of why I don't necessarily want to guarantee as much of 2025. That is the year that I think this contract could become a big problem. And I think, you have to be able to work out, hey, you're getting old. You're just not going to get paid as much. I don't think the contract needs to escalate the same way as well. His age 40 season, he would have a $50 million base salary. And I think that's almost patronizing to put in the contract. Neither side needs to have any delusions about Cousins making $50 million as a 40-year-old quarterback, right? And this is, again, all assuming that you love him and that you think he's great, forgetting any controversy about that. This is all just about, well, he was great, but now he's getting old, right? So those are some of the edits that I would make there. And then I think you can just kind of shave like probably 10, 15 mil off of the total value of this contract and probably still get away with it. But that is roughly what I think this looks like, where you get this really hard restructured cap hit this year, and then a slightly escalating structure up through 25, 26, where now the contract starts looking like what you pay old quarterbacks. And then I think the money starts to go down, whether that is a big, giant, unguaranteed base salary that then gets worked down as part of a renegotiation once the age cliff does hit him, and there's evidence of age that you can then kind of point to and say, okay, here is this. We can't pay you $45 million anymore because it's very clear that you're old. Can we work something else out? Or whether you say, hey, let's put incentives on it or something like that. That would be how it works out. But it is sort of a unique situation where you have a $35 million quarterback and you're talking about extending him for 5 years. That doesn't typically happen, it doesn't typically like time out that way. If there is a 35-year-old quarterback that you want to be your franchise quarterback, and you have to start factoring in the age of that. And for Nick's contract, I think the way he did that was by just not guaranteeing any money in 26, 27, or 28, which is all fine. And I just would take that further. Anyways, roast Nick. He extended Kirk Cousins for 5 years in an offseason plan. Go make fun of him at Nick Colson NFL on Twitter. I'll see y'all next weekend. We'll see. We might have some news, whether it's position coach stuff. I think that's all still shaking out. We might have some cap news. The Vikings might actually start making transactions here pretty soon. The clock's ticking, and by March 15th, it all has to be figured out. So whatever happens will have happened by then. I will talk to you all next week about whatever we come up with. And as always, Skol. Oh, it'll be Mock Draft Monday. We'll do that. Yeah. And as always, Skol.